Welcome to Season 2 of Deadly Truths. I'm Becca, your host, and this season we're walking straight into the heart of America's most haunted fortress, Fort Leavenworth. Behind its stone walls, soldiers were tried, executed, and buried under numbered headstones, their stories silenced but never gone. This is Leavenworth, Death in the Big House, where history and horror share the same address. So lock your doors and listen close, because once you step inside Fort Leavenworth, you don't leave unchanged. This is a bonus episode because, let's face it, Halloween is a great time for some of history's truly unsettling facts. They say Fort Leavenworth never sleeps, even when the soldiers go home and the lights go out. Something moves behind the old stone walls, boots clicking down empty corridors, doors slamming when no one's around, and whispers, soft, desperate whispers, from men long dead. So for this bonus episode, let's step inside one of the most haunted military prisons in America, the Old U.S. Disciplinary Barracks at Fort Leavenworth, Kansas. Before it was a ghost story, it was a fortress built in 1875. The U.S. Disciplinary Barracks was the Army's maximum security prison for soldiers who had broken military law. It stood like a medieval castle, towers, turrets, and narrow windows designed to let light in, but no hope. Inside, thousands of men served sentences for everything from desertion to murder. Some worked the rock quarry, others labored in silence. The cells were small, cold, and unforgiving. Over the decades, the prison saw well over 100 executions, by hanging at first, then later the electric chair, soldiers who betrayed their brothers in arms, men who turned their weapons on officers, those who lost control in wartime and couldn't come back. And when you stack that much violence, regret, and despair into one place, something always lingers. Between 1875 and 1961, 136 soldiers were executed at the barracks. These included Army, Navy, and Marine prisoners convicted of murder, rape, and wartime crimes under the Uniform Code of Military Justice. Hangings were standard until 1959. There were 2 executions by the electric chair that occurred in 1959, and the last execution was by hanging and took place in 1961. It was Private John Bennett. Most were interred in Cemetery Number 3, also called the Prison Cemetery or the Grog's Yard. Many graves are unmarked or marked only with a number. The Army refused full military honors for those executed. Notable cases, let me give you a little rundown here. Private John Bennett, 1961, he was the last hanging, and I'd mentioned him before. His crime was the rape of an Australian girl while stationed overseas. Bennett was the last person hanged by the U.S. military, and it was on April 13th of 1961. Even the victim's family pleaded for mercy, but President Kennedy refused clemency. Bennett sang a hymn moments before the trapdoor opened, the last voice ever heard in the gallows chamber. Then there was the Leavenworth Seven from 1938. It was a mass execution, and honestly, this will deserve its own episode. But to give you a little tidbit, the crime was the murder of guard Thomas B. Klein during a failed 1930 escape. After 8 years of trials and appeals, 7 inmates were hanged in one night on December 16th, 1938, one every 12 minutes. Let that set in. The Army chaplain said it was like watching death on an assembly line. One prisoner Rufus McDonald reportedly looked the warden in the eye and said, "See you in hell," before the lever dropped. There was Private George E. Smith, 1942. He had been convicted for a double murder of fellow soldiers. He was executed by the electric chair in Leavenworth. Witnesses said the lights dimmed across the compound when the switch was thrown. The Army chaplain described the odor of burnt cloth and ozone lingering for hours. Then there was Private Chester Gillette, 1918. He had been convicted of killing another soldier during the World War I era. He was also hanged, but on the original wooden gallows before the hangings became private. His was one of the first executions to be done behind closed doors with no press allowed, setting the tone for decades of secrecy that followed. By the time the old prison closed, at least 136 men had taken their last breaths inside those walls. Some swung from ropes, 2 rode the current of an electric chair. Their graves lie in neat rows on the hill, some marked and some erased by time through weather. In 2002, the military finally abandoned the old barracks. The new disciplinary barracks, modern and sterile, opened on the other side of the post. The old prison, its red brick walls weathered by a century of confinement, was torn down. But before it was demolished, soldiers assigned to guard or maintain the site reported things that couldn't be explained. One MP described hearing footsteps pacing the upper catwalk while he did his rounds. He radioed his partner. No one was supposed to be up there. They both checked. It was empty. But they both heard those steps continue, slow and heavy like boots on metal. Another guard said he could hear chains dragging down the old cell block hallway, long after the last prisoners had been moved out. Maintenance workers told of doors slamming shut on their own, light bulbs shattering in empty rooms, and cold pockets of air that made their breaths visible in mid-July. But the story that gets told the most often is about the execution chamber. 1930s and the 1940s, condemned soldiers were led down a narrow hallway into a small, windowless room. The gallows. Some begged, some prayed, some cursed the army to hell. When the trapdoor opened, their bodies dropped through to the basement below. Decades later, soldiers swore they could still hear the creak of the rope and the thud, the drop echoing through the walls. One guard even claimed he saw a man in uniform standing silently at the end of that hallway, just staring at him. But then, just like that, he was gone. But the air, it smelled like gun oil and sweat. Even after the demolition, the hauntings didn't stop. The site where the old barracks stood, now mostly empty ground, still draws military personnel who say strange lights flicker where the cell blocks used to be. Some locals claim they've heard the prison bell ringing faintly at night, though the tower was torn down years ago. The ghost, it seems, never got orders to move on. Even the new disciplinary barracks that was built in 2002 has reports of eerie activity. Guards speak of hearing voices in empty corridors, men calling "sir" or "help," and tones that don't belong to anyone living. Fort Leavenworth has earned the nickname the Place of the Dead, not because of legend, but because of fact. The number of soldiers executed there by hanging, by gunfire, by the electric chair is one of the highest in U.S. military history. Each man's final walk ended in the same spot. Each prayer echoed off the same stone walls, and every death left an imprint, layer upon layer, until the whole place became soaked in something darker than memory. Today, if you go to visit Fort Leavenworth, you can't enter the old prison grounds. They're sealed off. But some nights, when the Kansas wind cuts through, Soldiers on patrol say they can still hear the clang of those cell doors, the rattle of a chain, and the soft murmur of men counting down their final seconds. Because no matter how strong the walls, you can't lock away the past. You've been listening to Deadly Truths Leavenworth, Death in the Big House. Real crimes, real history, and the echoes that refuse to die. If you liked what you heard, share it, follow it, leave a rating. It helps new listeners find the show that keeps the stories of the forgotten alive. I'm Becca. Until next time, stay safe, my friends. As always, you can find all the resources in the show notes.